Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. I am still in my apartment today, but sitting in a slightly different place. I normally record over there, but I'm sitting at my dining room table today. I'm filming a very different video today because I just spent about the last hour trying to decide what to do with some of the yarn scraps I've had for a little while. So, long-time viewers of the podcast will know that I made the Catvent cowl at the end of 2019 because I bought a little kit from Cottage yarns, I think it was, to make the Catvent cowl. And you get 24, 25, like 10 gram minis, I think it was. And you then knit this colorwork cowl with it. And I have quite a bit of yarn left. So here they are in a nice little bowl. And I've had these in this little bag, which I think is really nice. But I finally wanted to do something with it because I've had these sitting around, like I said, since I think I finished it early 2020. But so it's been a while that they've been sitting around. And so I spent some time, like I said, the last hour approximately, kind of looking on Ravelry and focusing on the patterns I already own because I didn't want to buy anything new because I was like, it's yarn scraps, you know, it's trying to make the most of your yarn. I don't want to then go and have to buy a new pattern to be able to use these up. So I spent some time looking on Ravelry at different kind of projects that would work. Not necessarily just with this yarn, but more that would work quite nicely for scraps. And I have settled on a pattern, which I'll leave for the end. But I just thought I'd kind of talk through what I found and my kind of thoughts about it in case anyone else is kind of, you know, looking to use up their yarn scraps, especially because today is Sunday. Don't think it will be when this video goes up, but today is Sunday, so I know Scrappy Sunday is a thing for some people, and which I think is quite a nice thing. And I just thought I'd talk through the patterns that I've kind of curated together. So the first kind of category, I've got 5 categories, is socks. It was the thing I thought of first. I was like, what do you do with scraps? You make socks. And while that is a good idea, and I do have enough yarn officially. It's all fingering weight yarn, so all the patterns are fingering weight as well. And I have about 105 grams here, so it would be enough for a pair of socks. But I would technically need some other yarn to be able to do like the heel, the cuff, the toes and things, because I don't think any of these would really be enough for that. Especially if I want matching, and just matching socks in general wouldn't happen. But the kind of socks that I picked out, the patterns which I already own, that could just work, maybe not for these scraps, but for other scraps. I've got 4 of them, but part of the reason I also don't want to make socks is I've got a couple of balls of yarn where it's clearly not been plied. Like it's a singles yarn, so it's very fluffy, very soft, and I love it. But these will be horrible in socks because they will pill and wear through much quicker than the rest of the yarns. So I've kind of been like, nope, socks aren't going to work for this yarn. But if you do kind of have some scraps left over, here are some socks that I think could work really well. First pattern are the color palette socks, where I really like the fact that you've got these bigger stripes. Whether, I haven't looked at the pattern, but whether you can make those stripes kind of a bit smaller so you can use up, you know, smaller amounts of yarn, because I'm not sure what I have would be enough. But I think it's really nice when you've got a little bit more yarn left, if you really want to be able to show off those colors, especially if it's like hand dyed, variegated, then it's nice that you've got these bigger sections where you can really show off that yarn and it's not then immediately hidden by too much color work and too many colors kind of next to each other. So those ones I think are really nice, but like I said, you probably need bigger scraps than what I've got here. The other ones I was thinking of are the Aosta socks. This I think is really good if you've got small amounts of different colors. You probably would have to do some thinking about how you're gonna combine the colors to, one, if you want matching socks, that's always the hard thing with socks. You need to think, do I want matching or not? But also, how are the colours going to potentially work together? Because I have a variety of different colours, and even when I was knitting the cowl, I had to be a bit careful about which ones went where. And also with the Catvent cowl, the colour work design that you have, you kind of want to try and pick, you know, if you're going to knit a cat in, as in like the head of a cat in colour work, you probably, maybe, you could do a pink cat, but that's not really what I was going for. So I kind of focused on kind of the browns I have, also these kind of more neutral colours, whereas like even orange and stuff was okay, but I tried to focus on having cats that were a bit more real looking. And I think that's the thing as well of, I wanted a pattern where I didn't have to think, where the colour work pattern wasn't one where you've got anything that has to stand out or have to think too much about colour placement just because everything will kind of blend together. But I still think those socks are quite nice. Another option for these small amounts, if you've also got some extra sock yarn lying around, is, for example, the Claire de Lune socks, or really any of the socks that the petite knitter does. I can't remember how many fingering weight ones she has, because some of them are, I think, fingering weight yarn and then with mohair and things like that, but you might be able to tweak it. Those are really good because you've got these small sections of, especially in the Claire de Lune, of a pattern, and then you've got your main colour again, and then you've got another pattern that comes up, and you can just do them in different colours. And you don't then have to think about, okay, how can they kind of tradition? Should I try and do a fade or something? You can instead just, you know, do those 1-2 rows with that colour and then just switch to another one. And if they don't work too well together, they're not close enough to potentially cause an issue. And then the other socks, which are very similar to the Lice Slice baby socks that I've knitted, but those are like a DK worsted weight, and I did not want to hold any of this yarn double because I wouldn't have enough. And some of them, I think the beauty of the yarn would be lost if you hold it double. But those ones, so both the Lice Slice baby and the Lope socks, which are the ones that I'm recommending by Fiber Tales, you do the kind of like flea lice colour work, where it's one stitch in your contrast colour, a couple in your main, and then your contrast colour again. It just means that you can really use a lot of different colours, and once again, not have to worry about how they work together, but you could always kind of do some kind of a fade, or kind of what I did in the Lice Slice baby socks, where I had blue and red, and then use purple, so you kind of, you know, do a colour combination. So there's a lot of kind of fun playing you can do without the stress of potentially having colours that just do not work well near each other. So those are the socks, but like I said, I was like, socks isn't going to work for this yarn. I was like, I do not want a stressful project right now. So then I started thinking about mittens. Now, first thing you're probably going to think, but you also need to make 2 mittens. Yeah, I realised that as well. But the first ones I thought of where I do think more of a fade would suit these and would be beautiful if you've got like a mini skein set are the Cloudburst mittens. They've got a beautiful lace detail down the front, and I think for that not to get lost, you would want to not have all these crazy colour changes, but I think it could look beautiful if you kind of fade the yarn. So I could technically do it with some of the colours I've got here, for example, like with the purple, there's the other one, where, you know, I could go from these lighter purples and then start to move to these kind of darker purples, and I've also got more bright purple, could go in the middle, and I think that would be quite cool with scraps you've got, or like I said, a mini skein set would be really nice as well, and it would just give something different to the pattern instead of just, you know, knitting a pair of mittens in one colour. And I think I'm a bit lazy when it comes to fading. I don't know if I do the actual like fade rows. I think I would just switch from one colour to the other. And I think that would kind of be cool, especially if you've got a mini set which is intended as a fade, where I think you're then not going to see the changes as drastically depending on how it's been dyed. The other pattern I thought of was the one that I've been struggling through, if you've watched my podcast, the Enderlouse mitts. Especially the colour work that you get at the bottom of like the mitt in the cuff section, because it's kind of a 3-row repeat that you do. You can do those 3 rows in one colour, 3 rows in another, and very easily be able to change it. You can also just do, you know, switch every round and it would be fine. And I think that would be a lot of fun, and probably more fun than what I've had to do with mine, but I'll stop complaining. And it's only when you get to the colour work kind of at the top where you have to pay a bit more attention of when do you change colour to make sure that you can still really see that pattern, because the bottom pattern isn't anything really distinctive. That's why I think it's easy just to choose any colour and it's fine. It's the bit at the top where something could get lost if you don't pick the right colour in that colour work. And you'll also need another colour, but that's for most patterns, to be honest. The other thing I thought of was doing a cowl. So the first one I thought of was the lightwood cowl, because I think it even uses a like yarn that changes colour. I think it's spin cycle potentially, and it then just means you can kind of do that without having to pay so much money for one of these colour changing yarns. And especially if you have small amounts, with a cowl it's really nice when it's knit in the round, so you don't have to worry about your ends. You can just tie them off, leave them, and it's fine. And it would be quite a nice one. Obviously you need another skein of yarn as your main colour, and you want to think about, does it work with all the colours that you have? But I think that is a really fun one to get that, mainly to get that effect of a colour changing yarn without having to spend the money. The other one, which is a kind of similar thing, is the Montana Mountain by Andrea Mowry, where it's a kind of personal preference thing about whether you want to change colours randomly or whether you think it benefits from finishing a colourwork section. But they're both kind of very similar styles of patterns, where it would be quite easy to use a lot of different colours. The other cowl is one where I've made 2 of them already, and that's the Litmus cowl. It's a free pattern, which I think just already is a great selling point. And I can tell you it's a very fun and addictive pattern, because cowl, once again, it's worked in the round, so you don't have to worry about your ends. And while you might not think, you know, with something like this that you'll have enough to work the pattern as written, you can just make the stripes smaller. And while the pattern recommends that you have like a main color which you always stripe between these different colors, you don't have to do that. You can get creative and kind of just do whatever you want, and it's an easy enough pattern that it's really fun and really easy to play with color in that way. So I already have 2, and I was kind of like, I don't need another one, I'd like to make something else, but that would have probably been my go-to if I hadn't found something else. But that is a pattern I really, really do recommend, because I think with these Scrappy projects you do want them to be easy, and at least I do, and I don't want to have to do too much work and think too much. And you have the fun of stripes, so you're constantly motivated to keep going because you're going to change colour. Then the next thing I thought of was I made a gnome for my mum over Christmas, and I kind of thought those in general are quite good if you've got scraps left over. Now it is mainly, you know, you'd use it for certain sections, like making small accessories, maybe doing, you know, like the nose, the beard, maybe, what else could you have? What else did I do in the gnome? If there's any colour work and things like that for one of the hats or the clothes or something, you wouldn't be able, I don't think, be able to make any of the gnomes just with kind of scraps as small as I've got. But you would be able to do some really amazing things. So if you've got a lot of mini like scraps like I've got, where you have no idea what to do with, you could keep some of those kind of colours that would work well for something like that. And as you kind of, you know, either get more scraps or find other yarn where you've got a bit more, you could potentially make something like that. And I think they're really cute. So the gnome I made was the Leave Gnome Stone Unturned, which I think is a really cute name. And I think you definitely could, like the little gnome that you get, the backpack, things like that, you could easily do with some of these. And the rest you would obviously need some other yarn. But there might even be something, you know, in your stash like a skein where you're like, I have no idea what to do with this, or if you have got like larger scraps left over, that could work quite well. And the other one I had a look at, which I wanted to recommend, was Make No Mistake. I love the names, they're so nice. And once again, it's the same sort of thing that you should be able to, you know, the colorwork sections, you can play with different colors and things like that, and just really use up some of the stuff that you have where you're like, what do I do with this? And then the final section, hats. Didn't think of that for a really long time. That was like the last thing I thought of, where I was like, oh, you can totally do certain hats with kind of scraps. So the first pattern that I had a look at is, I have no idea if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, so I apologize. Craigalian. I think is it Katie Davies? I'll have it written here anyway. Which is just like a colorwork kind of hat. And I was like, oh, well, that would work quite well. Any kind of colorwork hat could work quite well. It's just, because of the like beautiful colorwork design that she does, you'd have to be careful that, like with the Enderlast mitts, that you don't then lose something by having different colors. So there's a little bit more thought that has to go into it, whereas like, no, I don't want any thought. I don't want to think. I just want to knit. So then I thought of the strier hat, and that's probably one of the easiest ones to do, but you won't use a lot of your scraps up with it. It's really just, you know, you do an occasional stripe. So if you have small amounts, it would work really well for that, but you won't use up a lot of your scraps, and you'll need a main color to go with it, and quite a lot of the main color to go with it. But a beautiful hat nonetheless. And then we've got the pattern I settled on. Saving the best for last, at least for my yarn, it's the best, which is the sea glass hat. So the sea glass kind of patterns, I think there's two different, like there's a top, there's a jumper, there's the hat. I don't know if there's any more, but what they use is just use up your scraps. That's what it's intended for, so it's already great. The hat is a free pattern, even better, and it's 1x1 color work. So it's not hard, and you don't have to think as much about your color placement, because it's in the pattern even encourages you just to go for it. There are tips and things that you have access to with the free pattern about how, like some tips they can give you about color placement and things to think about if you want that, but you don't have to. They kind of say just go with your instincts, use whatever colors you've got, and just, you know, have fun and play around. And that sold me. I was like, I'm going to do that. So I do need a main color. You can carry that color, the main color, all the way through to the end and just constantly change out your contrast color. But I want to try and use as many of these scraps as possible. So I'm using a main color for the brim, and then knitting one round with that color before I switch into two of these colors. And what I'll probably do, because I have some of these that are like really tiny, I'll start with one of these smaller ones and then immediately go and join a bigger scrap, so that when the little one runs out, I can then join another kind of like, you know, big one, and be able to use them up that way and have the colors kind of not change like right one after the other. Hard to explain, but hopefully in my next podcast episode I'll be able to show my progress and kind of be able to show a bit more what I mean of what I've been doing. But yeah, that's the pattern I've settled on, and it ticks all the boxes for me for what I want to do with this yarn. And I hope the video was kind of, you know, helpful. I thought, since I've just done all this work, I might as well, you know, share how I've done it, because maybe not everyone has thought about some of these things. I'm sure there's other things people do as well, but I just thought I'd share, and you know, maybe to give you some inspiration for what you could use your scraps for, or maybe, I can't remember what the other one was, but maybe it inspires you. So I'm probably going to go knit on that. And like I said, you know, it's Sunday for me today, so it's quite nice to do something scrappy on Sunday, Scrappy Sunday, and just kind of slowly work away at this and know that I'm getting at a project where I just had this yarn lying around. For the main colour, I'm going to use one of the leftover skeins of Arvetta Classic that I have from the mitts that I made for a friend of mine in a previous podcast episode. There's some colours where I literally used like 2 meters. So I've got plenty of yarn to be able to make that hat. And I've got some neutrals which will work really well because there's so many different colours in here. But yeah, that's everything. So I hope it was enjoyable. A bit of a different video to what I've done before, and obviously quite a bit shorter, which can be obviously a nice thing. Good for me when it comes to editing. But yeah, that's everything. So if you've got any kind of questions or any patterns that are your go-to patterns when it comes to using up scraps, I'd love to read them in the comments below. And it will also be great for other people to be able to, use that as a reference for any other patterns. And maybe I'll do it again in the future when I find some more scraps where I'm like, I need to use these up somehow, and I'll go pattern hunting again. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!